So now we want to look at bringing languages together in the languages classroom. And of course, there's more than our target language in that classroom. There are the home languages of our students. And for some students, that's English. And for some students, we've seen the diversity of languages that we have in South Australia. And of course, everyone's classroom is different. And you'll know some of the range of languages that the students in your classroom know. And there might be languages there that you don't know about yet, and that you've got the opportunity to find more out about. And of course, the Department for Education really has acknowledged a lot of this diversity and how our students' multilingual resources really are resources that support their learning across languages. Some of the points that Andrew raised earlier in the day, we really know that literacy skills are not English specific, so students bring a range of those skills with them into the classroom. We know that multilingual students are more easily able to perceive language as a system, and then the way they attack learning an additional language is supported by that. We know that development of skills in one language has benefit in learning another. And so when we have students who are experienced in learning languages, they bring those skills with them to the classroom. And when we have students whose home language is English and may be learning their first additional language, we know that learning of that language will benefit them in their English and across all of their learning. But the big question here is we know it's great. Don't need to tell me that, right? But what do we do? So we want to give you some more examples for practice and look at ways to draw on and connect students' whole linguistic repertoires for language learning and for literacy learning in your classrooms. And we know that because there's such a diversity of contexts, it's really important to have the time to be creative and think about how to make that work for you. So I'm going to hand over to Kathleen, who will lead us through an activity. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you, May. So we're going to play around with little wise sayings that we often use when we are parents and we're giving advice to children, or we are teachers giving advice to students in the classroom. And we're going to see how we might be able to use these wise sayings and the degree to which they actually translate directly from one language to another. Now, this was an activity that I ran in a bilingual teacher training program in Bhopal in India a few years ago. And what we did was we tried to work with a wise saying in a language. And if you look at the third line from the top, you will see the English version of this as translated was, "Empty pot makes noise." Now, can you tell me what that would be in standard English as we know it is in Australian English? How would we say that? Empty vessels make the most noise. Now, I have a great sensitivity towards that particular one because the teachers used to say to me when I was in primary school, remember that empty vessels make the most noise. So I have to try and remember about this and try to shorten what I say. Okay, so we had the teachers in this room and they came up with their languages and their scripts. Andrew, because the scripts in India are, you will notice, not exactly identical. But what we found was that depending on where people came and the language in which the wise saying was understood had variations. And we had a really interesting discussion about the variations. And when it came back to English, it wasn't the empty vessel makes the most noise, it's empty pot makes noise. So it's a slightly different interpretation. I'm going to now take you through images of some cards that were made in relation to wise sayings, and they come from South Africa and from a part of South Africa where 3 languages operate. And children regularly learn to use 3 languages. And I'll start with English because that's most familiar to you. But you will see that the illustrations also indicate that the wise saying in English, like a fish out of water. Now, I don't know if there's anybody here who understands Afrikaans or Dutch or German who can work that out. What? what it is in Afrikaans. In Afrikaans sê ons soos 'n vis op die droë grond. A vis is a fish on dry ground. Thank you. So like a fish out of water isn't translated directly in Afrikaans. The wise saying has a slight change in meaning, and it has to do with the cultural context. Now, the other thing I want to just you to note here, that the wise saying at the top of each card changes in terms of the language, because what we were trying to do with these cards was to show students in the classroom and also children in general that it's not necessarily the case that you have to have English in big letters and another language in small letters. So the next one is, and now you've got the Xhosa at the top followed by English. So what I've tried to show you is a sequence of how you can arrange languages in sequence of priority. And here you've got Umvundla uzek inklela, which doesn't mean the apple falls far from the tree. You can see that from the picture. What does it mean? The rabbits don't go very far away from their homes. They run around their homes, they muck around in their homes. So it's the same sort of thing. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Why do you think you might have a different wise saying for the apple doesn't fall far from the tree in another language?
Maybe they don't have apples.
Right. In the areas that the Xhosa-speaking people traditionally live, there are no apple trees. So why would you have the apple doesn't fall far from the tree? But you do have rabbits or hares, and they hang around and make a nuisance, okay? So what I would like you to do is to go back in your files to a little task. And I would like you, in groups, form a group of teachers with different languages at your tables. Think of a well-known proverb that is known in different communities, even if there are some differences, and translate this into the languages of the group and help each other to do this. And then I want you to think about the challenges that you face when you're doing this and how you resolve them. You could, but you don't have to do this. This would be an alternative. So if you don't want to do this, you could see how you might turn this into a poster. All right, but I think leave that. Rather work with part A because we don't have enough time. So try to see if you can agree in your group of 3 or 4 on a wise saying and see how you can translate it. You don't have to start with it in English. You could start with it in the language that you are teaching and translate back. So these are really just a taste of what one could be doing. Some of these activities could take 2 or 3 lessons. So it's the really awkward thing about trying to do a lot of things in a workshop is that you get little tastes. So I apologize for that. There's a resource that you might be able to use, and it takes you to a portal, a global portal. It's called the Storybook, the Global Storybook Portal. This is where Professor Bonnie Norton-Pierce has opened up a global website for people who want to translate stories or make stories. And what has happened is they've developed something from originally the African Storybook Project. I can't remember the number of countries now. Is it 36 countries or 36 different portals that they've got? You might find some of these stories and the portals helpful because there is also a site where you can download the structure of a storybook and you can actually populate this, or your students might be able to do this. So you might find that useful to you. We would like you just to spend a couple of minutes reflecting on some of the things that you have been working with and thinking about over the last while. What do you or your students do with home languages in the classroom? In other words, the languages that the students bring. What connections do you make between English and additional languages for literacy in your languages teaching? How can you use home languages, different scripts, English literacy to enhance the literacy in your languages classroom? So really the question is number 3, what do you think that you might be able to do after wrestling with some of the things that we've been working with today, how would you be able to build that trajectory from the home languages, English, and into your languages classroom? Trying to massage the miserable number of minutes that you get a week by pulling in and stealing from what other people are doing in order to try to develop literacy in the language that you teach.